I want you to picture the Middle East, almost 1400 years ago. It's a world dominated by two ancient superpowers, and they are locked in this endless, brutal struggle for control. But way off on the horizon, a storm is gathering, one that's about to redraw the entire map of the world forever.
So, who are the players? Well, on one side, you've got the Eastern Roman Empire. You probably know them as Byzantium. And on the other, the mighty Sassanid Persian Empire. For hundreds of years, these two were the titans of the known world. But as this quote hints, a third power was rising from the deserts of the south, and it was ready to make its mark. This newcomer, the Rashidun Caliphate. And it was about to change absolutely everything.
So how in the world did this happen, right? How did a brand new power rise so fast and challenge these ancient giants? Well, to get that, you have to see the old world for what it really was. A stage that was perfectly, and you could almost say tragically, set for a takeover. I mean, just look at the state of these two empires. They were completely and totally exhausted. They had just finished a devastating 26-year-long war against each other. Both empires were financially broke, politically a mess, and their armies were just spent. They were like two heavyweight boxers who had just knocked each other out cold, leaving them both totally vulnerable. And this right here is a crucial piece of the puzzle, the collapse of their buffer states. You can think of the Sassanids and Lakhmids as the alarm systems and the frontline security guards for both empires. But the Romans had pushed their allies away with religious arguments, while the Sassanids just completely dismantled their buffer kingdom. What did that do? It left their southern borders, the border with Arabia, wide open and dangerously exposed. And if you think that's bad, over in Persia, the situation was even worse. The end of the war didn't bring any peace. It brought total chaos. The empire was tearing itself apart with internal power struggles. You had kings being assassinated one after the other. This created this massive power vacuum, right on the doorstep of the new rising caliphate. So into this vacuum of power stepped the newcomer. While these old, crumbling empires were busy bleeding each other dry, a powerful, unifying force was building its strength down in the Arabian Peninsula. And just look at the incredible speed of this transformation. In a little over 2 decades, a new faith, Islam, had not only emerged but had politically unified all these feuding tribes of Arabia into a single state, under a new leader, the Caliph. The last step was to lock in that unity during the Ridda Wars, which were a series of campaigns to bring any rebellious tribes back into the fold after the Prophet's death. And you gotta understand, this is so important. The Ridda Wars did way more than just unify Arabia. They forged a brand new kind of army. These weren't just tribal raiders anymore. No way. They were now a disciplined, battle-hardened, and incredibly motivated fighting force. And they were led by brilliant and experienced commanders. And there was one general who stood above them all, Khalid ibn al-Walid, a man so gifted at warfare he was known as the Sword of God. And his campaigns were about to unleash a style of fighting the old empires were completely, totally unprepared for. You see, the Caliphate's armies were almost always outnumbered. Their real edge wasn't in their numbers, it was in their movement. They could travel light and incredibly fast, and they used the vast desert not as a barrier, but as a highway, like an ocean of sand that their heavier, slower enemies just couldn't cross. This let them pop up and strike where no one ever expected. Okay, so check out Khalid's genius at work. This slide breaks it down perfectly. At the Battle of Wallajah, he used a tactic called the double envelopment. First, he'd pin the enemy in place with his infantry. Then he'd lure them forward, make them think they were winning, and then bam, cavalry he'd hidden in the terrain would slam into their rear from both sides. It was absolutely devastating. And then he pulls off one of the most audacious moves in all of military history. To get his army to Syria, Khalid doesn't take the safe, long road. No, he leads his men on a high-risk, death-defying march straight across the desert, even forcing his camels to drink extra water so his soldiers could use them as living canteens. He bypassed every single Roman defense and just appeared, as if from nowhere, deep inside their territory. This incredible maneuver led straight to the decisive clash for Syria, the Battle of Yarmouk. The Romans had gathered a gigantic army to crush the invaders once and for all. And as this chart shows you pretty clearly, the Caliphate's forces were hugely outnumbered. On paper, they stood absolutely no chance. But, as the Romans were about to learn, numbers aren't everything. Over 6 long, grueling days, Khalid's unified command, his brilliant use of a mobile cavalry reserve, and the sheer discipline of his troops
just completely dismantled the larger, less organized Roman army. The victory was total. Roman power in Syria was shattered forever.
And here's the incredible thing. The victory at Yarmouk wasn't some isolated event. It was one half of a devastating 1-2 punch that in the very same year knocked out both of the old world superpowers. A new world order was born. At the exact same time Khalid was winning in Syria, another Muslim army under Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas was facing the main Sassanid imperial force over in Iraq at the Battle of al-Qadisiyyah. Just think about this. Incredible parallel. In the same year, 636 CE, the Caliphate faced the full might of both empires on two totally separate fronts, and won, decisively, on both. For the Sassanids, the defeat was catastrophic. They lost over 20,000 men, including their commander-in-chief, Rostam. This was a blow from which the 400-year-old empire would never, ever recover. Their entire imperial army was basically wiped out. I mean, just let that sink in for a moment. Within just a few short years of the Prophet Muhammad's death, the entire geopolitical map of the ancient world had been redrawn. The rivalry between Rome and Persia, the thing that had defined the region for centuries, was over. A new empire, born from the deserts of Arabia, had arrived. So, what was the ultimate key to this incredible world-changing success? Was it the religious passion of a newly unified people fighting for their faith? Was it the pure strategic genius of commanders like Khalid? Or was it just being in the right place at the right time, facing two mighty empires at their absolute weakest moment? You know, the truth is, it was probably a perfect storm of all three. A storm that didn't just change the Middle East, it changed the world